Hi all! Sorry for the week break in between the last video and this one. When I recorded the video, I had forgot that I'd already scheduled not doing one last week because it was my wedding anniversary. So yeah, it was a busy week. But I realized that the last chapter kind of ended on a very exciting note, so apologies about that again. But I am back and I'm going to do the next chapter. One quick note that I haven't really talked about anywhere yet, but I have gotten into game development school, and I think that's going to be a really fun way to utilize my writing and world building skills in a different way. I like to play games and I like to write stories, and so I think that's going to be a really cool, anyway, new thing to do. But being a student again, after many years not being a student, it's going to kind of change up my schedule a bit as far as how much time I actually have to be writing when I'm not, doing this new adventure. So I'm still planning on finishing reading this for you. And if I can, I will also read the second book. I'm not certain yet if I will be able to. I'm going to be starting classes in September, and then yeah, it's just going to change my schedule around a bit with my kids and writing and then driving to school and all this stuff. Anyway, but also very exciting. So yeah, I will. If you follow me on Instagram, that's usually where I post the most, and so there I will just try to keep everyone appraised of kind of what's going on and how that changes things and what other new exciting things that might come out of that process. So I think it will be a lot of fun. So last reading was chapter 19. Lyric and Runa were just kidnapped by Cyrene and are now on their ship. So let's just get into it. All right. Chapter 20, Lyric. Lyric clung to Runa and Kel, watching the fast movements of the Cyrene crew as they scrambled across the ship's deck, pulling on ropes and climbing the rigging. The sails snapped as they caught the wind, billowing out above their heads, and Lyric felt the ship speed up. A woman came for them, with blonde hair and a square sun-browned face. "Kaya wants them below decks," she said. The man guarding them nodded and looked at Lyric. "Get up," he said. Kel helped Lyric stand, and they followed the woman to a hatch in the center of the ship. She wrenched it open and pointed at Lyric to climb down. Doing so, Lyric found herself in a large room filled with hammocks strung between the posts and beams overhead, some occupied by sleeping Cyrene sailors. Once Runa, Kel, and the two Cyrene climbed down into the chamber, the sailors propelled them past the hammocks to a storage room. It was filled with iron-wrapped barrels and stacks of bundles carefully wrapped in stiff waxed fabric. At the back, secured to the sides of the ship and separating the room in two, was a tall iron cage. A large flat plate was attached to the door, where the lock should be, dark gold mage runes interlaced across its surface in a teardrop pattern. The female sailor slapped her hand against the plate, and the door unlocked with a soft click. Wrenching it open with one muscled arm, she grabbed Lyric by the shoulder and stripped off her pack, tossing it in the corner. "Get in," the woman said. Looking back at Runa and Kel, also being relieved of their packs, Lyric warily stepped into the cage. Runa and Kel were shoved in behind her, and the woman slammed the door shut. It clicked, the lock engaging. "What do you intend to do with us?" Runa demanded, glaring at the sailors through the iron bars. "That's up to the captain," the woman said. Her eyes lingered on Lyric for a moment, and she shared an uncertain look with the second sailor. "Do you think that—" she started, then trailed off, indicating something with a flick of her eyes. The man shrugged and tapped the sword at his waist. Where would they go? "True." She slapped the man on the chest. "Let's go." Turning, the two Cyrene walked back into the sleeping chamber and slammed the door. Runa crossed her arms and started pacing back and forth like a cat, her face a mask of rumination. A bone-chilling numbness sunk into Lyric's bones as she stared around their prison. It seemed like only minutes ago that they'd been speaking to Captain Polarin at the gate. He'd been about to let them in. Whether or not he'd planned to detain them, assuming they'd stolen the pendant, they'd have been within the same building as their grandfather. But now, kidnapped and sailing away from Rendishar, help for their mother was farther out of reach. How many leagues now stretched between them and Elena? She was going to die, and they could do nothing. Kel, shrugging off his cloak, pulled Lyric into his arms. She leaned into him, pressing her head against his chest, and tried to rise above her despair. It was unfamiliar being on a ship. The constant sway made Lyric's stomach flip. She'd been on a rowboat before, but only on a lake where the water was calm and free from waves. It'd be laughable if this weren't the worst thing that could have happened, Runa said. Lyric blinked and lifted her head to watch her sister. What? The Sareni have been trying to kidnap us for who knows how long, and now they've done it, Runa said. Only the people who took us don't even realize who we are. Maybe not yet, but they believe you are a princess. Maybe they think you're a daughter of one of Mama's siblings. Lyric rubbed her forehead, trying to think. They must be taking us to the Gale, right, Kel? Lyric looked up at him. The skin around Kel's eye had started to bruise, darkening to a wine red. Kel frowned and nodded. I think it's likely. I assume kidnapping a member of the Scorched Court, specifically someone from the Rendesharan royal family, would require a meeting of clans. The Gale will be the ones to decide what to do with you. She'll interrogate us, won't she? Lyric asked. The woman, Kaya. I would if I were her, Runa said. Lyric chewed on her lip, thinking back to Kaya's comment about her looks and the vague conversation between the two Sareni who'd locked them up. They think I'm Sareni, Lyric said, or that someone in my family is. She watched Runa pace. But they don't think I'm a princess. They must not know our father is Sareni. Runa nodded and worried her thumbnail with her teeth. I wonder if it helps or hurts us when they realize we share their blood. Does it make us allies, or do we become more dangerous? I suppose it depends on how much they hate us. Either way, you'll be valuable to them, Kel said. His arms tightened around Lyric. Should we tell them who we are? Lyric asked. Maybe we can negotiate, agree to willingly meet with the Gale, if they let us send a message to help Mama. Send a message to who? Runa asked. King Rakaran? She barked a laugh. I'm sure they'd consider that treasonous. For one of them, maybe, Lyric said. Not us. We have to do something, Rue. The longer we're captives, the longer Mama goes without healing. Grandfather might think it was Mama at the gate and assume she's hurt, but he won't know she's dying in Avern. He'll think she's here. Runa nodded. We try to negotiate then, and if that doesn't work, we'll escape. She glared around their cell with a fierce expression. Yes, Lyric said. If we can get to the smaller boat, maybe you can summon wind to blow us to shore, Kel said. Lyric nodded, feeling hopeful. Yes, we can't be that far from land. Unfortunately for their plan, no one came. After pacing with Runa and Lyric, shouting for help, Kel had sat down with his back to the ship's hull, and Lyric joined him. It was rather intimate how they were sitting together, with Lyric leaning against his chest and framed by his legs, but she was too tired and thirsty to care what Runa might think. Also, it was decidedly more comfortable than having her back against the wood or iron. Lyric's head lolled against Kel as she watched Runa flex her hands on the iron bars. Her sister refused to sit, pacing like a caged animal, intent on being free. The bastards could at least bring us water, Runa growled, her voice raspy. Why hasn't anyone come down? Where's Kaya? Maybe they forgot we're here. Lyric shifted her legs. She was beginning to worry that the sailors intended on ignoring them until they reached their destination. What if they had hours more to sail? What would she do if she had to relieve herself? She wouldn't go in front of Kel. Lyric blushed, happy he couldn't see her face. We're willing to talk, but no one is here to listen, Runa said. She growled and stalked back towards Lyric and Kel, finally sitting across from them atop her cloak. Lyric looked at the large metal plate on the door and chewed on her lip. She thought about how the sailor had opened it with her palm. The woman hadn't said anything, hadn't whispered a rune word. Why had it opened? Was the lock tied to the woman in some way? No, that wouldn't make sense. Having a cage only one person could open. Could it be like the wyverns? Could the lock read your blood and respond in a specified way? The lock, Lyric said. Her words were barely audible, and she cleared her throat, repeating herself. She needed water. It opened because the sailor was Sareni. Runa looked at her, raising her eyebrows. Did Gandara tell you that? No, Lyric said, just puzzling it out myself. Runa nodded and looked at the door. Makes sense. Which means we can probably open it. Being half Sareni should be enough, right? If we can unlock the door, we can get water, find Kaya, and make her talk to us. Maybe she can't escape just yet, but getting out of here would be an improvement. I can't sit here and wait, Rue. Mama needs us. Runa nodded. Worth trying. She scratched at her scalp. I've been trying to call Eleonora, ask her how to replicate Mother's spell that took us to the Vale. If we could move like that, we could use the spell to escape. Runa sighed. She's silent, though, muttering in the back of my head like she's on the other side of a wall. Lyric nodded. Gandara's been distant since Avern, she said. She shifted, pushing against Kel's knee to help herself stand, and walked to the door. Leaning against the cage, Lyric stuck her arm through the bars and reached up for the lock. She bent, contorting awkwardly, trying to reach higher and get her palm on the flat plate. Ignoring the pain in her shoulder, she twisted again, inching her fingers across the metal until she felt it beneath her entire hand. Lyric pressed her palm flat against it and willed the door to open. Nothing happened. Lyric shifted her hand again, pressing her skin against the cold metal. Was it growing warmer? She pushed harder and heard a click. "I think I did it," Lyric said, sliding her arm back through the bars. Bracing her feet, she pulled on the door. It opened easily, and she rushed through it, diving for her pack. Ripping it open, she dug out her water skin and gulped down water. Lyric wiped water off her chin and looked up to find Kel and Runa behind her. They'd hunted for their water as well, and the three of them stared at each other, momentarily elated by their success. "What now?" Lyric asked. "Walk up on deck?" "We should disguise ourselves," Runa said. "There might be clothes in there. Maybe we'll have an opportunity to steal the small boat and escape that way. We should be ready." Lyric nodded. "Yes, I think you're—" The ship lurched to the side, throwing them off their feet. Lyric's cheek slammed against the wall, and she groaned as a knee jabbed into her back. Something boomed loud and close, and she heard wood splinter somewhere above. Untangling themselves, the three of them staggered towards the storage room's door. "Is it Grandfather?" Lyric asked. Runa frowned. "He doesn't have a ship." "Maybe he's allied with someone who has a fleet," Kel said. "Whoever it is, this may be an opportunity to escape in the confusion," Lyric said. "I don't want to stay down here if the ship is being torn apart." To free their movement, they stuffed their cloaks into their bags and slung them over their shoulders. Runa pressed her ear to the door, listening, then opened it. The ship shuddered again, and they braced themselves in the doorway, staring into the dim room beyond. They could hear the clang of metal striking metal above. "Someone's fighting," Runa whispered. "I don't see anyone here. I doubt they'd sleep through this." They moved cautiously into the room, eyeing the empty hammocks. Some personal belongings had been knocked free and were rolling across the floor as the ship bucked. Lyric winced as something smacked into her ankle. She staggered to a trunk strapped to the floor and opened it. Rifling through the clothes inside, Lyric pulled out a bundle of white breeches. "This isn't going to work," she hissed at Runa, "unless you want to bear our chests up there." "Here, throw this on." Runa tossed a sheepskin at her. "Tie up the bottom of your dress so it looks like trousers, like when we went fishing. Better than nothing, right?" "Here," Lyric said, tossing the trousers to Kel. Turning her back to him, she draped the sheepskin around her shoulders and tucked the bottom of her dress up into her belt. She swayed as the ship shook again, staring down at her exposed stockings and boots. "This isn't going to fool anyone." Runa shrugged. "Maybe it'll confuse them enough that they won't try to stop us right away." She pulled off her stockings and boots and stuffed them into her pack. Copying her, Lyric straightened and saw Runa staring past her appraisingly. "He might avoid their notice," Runa said. Lyric looked behind her and felt her mouth go dry. Kel had traded his clothes for the loose white trousers she'd given him. His chest was bare, the lean muscles of his body pale in the dim room. He'd found a vest from somewhere and pulled it on, likely thinking to cover the tattoos and nubs on his back. He grinned as her eyes slid down his chest. "Enough gawking, Lie," Runa said. Lyric blushed and spun back around. She staggered to the ladder leading back to the deck above and put her foot on the bottom rung. "What if we walk out into a battle?" Lyric asked. She flexed the fingers of one hand, remembering how it felt to summon the wind. "We're not defenseless," Runa said, "though I shouldn't create fire unless we know we can get off the boat." "Let me go first," Kel said. Lyric looked back at him and arched an eyebrow. "Not to diminish your offer, but you're the only one who doesn't know magic." Kel smiled crookedly. "Fair enough. After you, then." Feeling a thrill of excitement, Lyric climbed the ladder and put her hand against the hatch. She shoved it open and stepped out into chaos. Fighting sailors filled the deck, wrestling and attacking each other with swords. They were all Sireni, though some wore green sashes while others wore blue. Lyric scrambled out of the way as Runa and Kel joined her and scanned for the sailors she recognized. Didn't Kaya's crew wear blue? Who were the new Sireni? Magic crawled across Lyric's skin, and she whipped her head sideways, seeing another ship draw close. She knew with certainty that there was a mage aboard the new vessel, churning the waves beneath them. Someone shrieked, and the air massed around her, bringing pain to her temples like it had when they'd fought the Screamers in the Vale. The ship bucked, and Lyric fell into Kel. Shaking her head as the pressure released, Lyric grabbed Kel and Runa, and together they scrambled away from the hatch. They tried to avoid notice by keeping away from the thickest of the fighting, but everywhere they turned, someone blocked their way. Watching the battle shift around them, Lyric thought the Sireni were avoiding killing blows, resorting to fists and cudgels instead of the knives and swords on their waists. The wounds the sailors received were crippling but not severe. "Hey!" one of Kaya's sailors yelled, pointing at them. Lyric, Runa, and Kel hurried away, taking cover beside a stack of crates. The man who'd spotted them began to chase, but was quickly distracted by an attack from a woman wearing green. Lyric caught sight of Kaya in the melee. The woman was smashing her fist into a bald man's face. Shoving aside the bleeding man, Kaya turned and her eyes focused on Lyric. She straightened in alarm, eyes wide and disbelieving. "Secure the prisoners!" Kaya yelled. An older man with thick brown hair streaked with silver spun at Kaya's shout. His green eyes met Lyric's as he shoved aside a sailor and drove him downward with a sharp jab from his elbow. Lyric watched him, caught by his stare. He was muscled and bronzed. His face was square with an angular nose and a series of rings in his left eyebrow. An old scar crossed through his left cheek and down the side of his neck. Shoving a blue-belted Sireni out of the way, the man advanced on Lyric, Runa, and Kel with a purposeful stride. Lyric put her arms out, shoving Runa and Kel back. Her eyes darted past the scarred man to Kaya. The man held up his hands as he approached. He wasn't holding a weapon. "I'm here to help you," he said. His voice had a rough quality to it, with an odd lilting accent similar to Kaya's. "Who are you?" Runa demanded, raising her hand. The man's mouth lifted at one corner as he met Runa's fierce gaze. "Someone who doesn't want you to become a pawn for the fire or the sea. Please, we must go now." He gestured towards the other ship. A trio of green-belted Sireni crowded behind him, fending off Kaya's sailors with seasoned efficiency. Blocked from reaching them, Kaya screamed furiously for her crew. "Please, Lyric and Runa," the man said. "I'm a friend of your mother." "How do you know our mother?" Runa asked. "How do you know who we are?" "I'll explain everything, but we must go now." He looked at Runa. "You look like her, like Dendashara." Same untamed look in her eyes. Lyric looked at Runa, thinking quickly. Could he be their uncle, the one they tried to reach? "We should go with him," she said. Runa, eyes narrowed, stared at her, then gave a sharp nod. "Kel?" Lyric asked, looking at him. Kel nodded. "Can't be any worse." The man laughed and clapped his hands. "Good," he said. "Follow me." He ushered them to the side of the ship, the other green-belted sailors clearing a path. Kaya screamed furiously, unable to reach them, as the new Sireni helped Lyric, Runa, and Kel down into a smaller boat. She attempted to pull them back as they shoved away, but the other mage, unseen on the second ship, was stronger and blew apart her spell. The waves made an odd sucking sound, and their little boat broke free and shot across the water, making Lyric's eyes water. Reaching the second ship, they were helped aboard by green-belted sailors, and then the little boat was hauled onto the deck and secured. The sails were adjusted, the lines pulled free, and the ship skimmed away across the water, heading north. If Kaya attempted anything else with her magic, Lyric didn't feel it. The man, who'd seemingly rescued them, attempted to direct them to the ship's cabin, but Runa planted her feet and fixed him with a commanding stare. "Tell us who you are," she demanded. "So like your mother," he said, grinning. "All fire." "We can talk in my cabin. It's quieter there. We won't have to shout." Indeed, the wind was picking up and tearing their words away, making it hard to hear. Lyric put a hand to her face, trying to keep her hair out of her mouth and eyes. "Is this all your screamer?" she asked, gesturing at the darkening sky. She glanced towards the prow and saw a woman with her hands on the railing, staring at the clouds. "No, a storm's coming," the man said. "We'll have to ride through it. It's gonna get rough. I'll tell you our plan once we're inside." Smiling encouragingly, he turned and walked to the cabin. A large, bald man with a winged fish tattooed around his neck watched them but made no move to force them to follow. The other sailors had already returned to whatever duties they had on the large ship, leaving Lyric, Runa, and Kel unguarded. Not knowing what else to do, and curious who the man was, Lyric shared a glance with her companions and followed the man into the cabin. Chapter 21. Kel. Kel rested his hand on Lyric's shoulder and inspected the cabin. It looked much like the quarters of any sea captain, with a large writing desk and chair, both secured to the floor, and a curving window of rippled pale green glass letting filtered light into the room. In front of the table sat 2 wooden stools, easy to stow when the need arose. To Kel's left were a heavy wood trunk and a bunk set into the wall. A narrow mirror hung beside the bed, framed in hammered copper. The room was clean and orderly, much like the man who'd seated himself behind the desk. Kel studied the man's weathered face and watched as he moved a stack of maps and lit a small lantern with something from his pocket. "I'm Captain Eladin," the man said, looking at Lyric and Runa, "and this is my ship, the Talon. Please sit. I know you're wondering why Sireni are fighting each other and what my interest is in the 2 of you. He gestured at the stools. Kel glanced at Lyric, wondering if she recognized the captain's name, but she merely touched his hand and sat down on the left stool. Keeping quiet, Lyric removed her pack, setting it on the ground by her feet, and adjusted the sheepskin around her shoulders. Runa sat on the other stool and braced her hands on her knees, fixing Captain Elodin with a hard-eyed stare. They must not want him to know yet that they've heard of him, Kel thought. I apologize I've no seat to offer you, Elodin said, looking at Kel with sharp eyes. Who do I have the honor of addressing? I'm Kel said, not bothering with his full title. He moved closer behind Lyric and gave the captain a direct look. He's our friend, Lyric said. Elodin glanced between her and Kel, and a knowing smile curved his lips. Feeling the tips of his ears flush beneath the man's keen eyes, Kel was saved from further embarrassment by the sound of the door opening. The bald man stepped inside, carrying tin cups and a dark green bottle with rope wrapped around the neck. He placed them on the desk and nodded at Captain Elodin. Thanks, Lairdy, Elodin said, nodding back. Uncorking the bottle, he poured pale wine into all 4 cups, then, selecting one for himself, leaned back in his chair. Not all Sareni want to continue the war with Rendishar, or approve of kidnapping or killing the heirs of the Scorched Court. When I learned the Gale intended to abduct you, we tried to prevent it. We? Runa asked. Elodin drained his cup and set it on the table. Your mother and I. We were together when Dendashar received word you'd been kidnapped. Regrettably, I was unable to accompany her when she left to help you. Kel frowned, recalling Lyric's theory at the inn in Heldon's Rock that Elena was responsible for burning the Rendisharan fleet. The discussion must have crossed Lyric's mind as well, for her back straightened and her hand twitched atop her knee. You destroyed Rendishar's fleet, Lyric said. Elodin raised an eyebrow and smiled. Pride and satisfaction filled his green eyes. Lyric looked at Runa. I told you she did it, Lyric said. Her eyes shifted back to Elodin. You're our uncle. Yes, Elodin said. I was alerted that Kaya found the princesses in Rathgar's hold and was taking you to the Gale. I sailed immediately to intercept. I promised your mother I'd protect you if you ended up in Sareni hands. She figured it out, Lyric said, surprised. I thought she didn't recognize me. She cocked her head. They didn't seem to know we're half Sareni. Is it a secret that our father had children? Yes. Elodin's face grew grim, and he flexed his fingers on the arm of his chair. Dendashara didn't want anyone to know. I didn't know until your mother and I met 4 years ago. Kel thought about his birth mother and how she'd given him up. Does their father know they're alive? He heard himself ask. Lyric looked back at him, eyes filled with a longing he understood. Elodin hesitated, then gave a short nod. Yes, when your mother found me, she was looking for him. I sent him a message. A message? Lyric asked. He isn't with you or the other Sareni? No. Where is he now? Lyric asked. I don't know, Elodin said. I haven't spoken with him for several years. He said he was unwell. And you didn't hunt him down? Runa asked. Make sure he wasn't dying? She made a disgusted sound. You're his family. He disappears sometimes. Elodin didn't seem upset by Runa's reproach, but there was something in his eyes that Kel couldn't decipher. He doesn't live like regular men. Lyric straightened again, her head turning as though to look at Kel, but she shifted back without meeting his eyes. Is he human? Lyric asked. Runa raised her eyebrows. Is he human? What kind of question is that, Lai? Kel felt his mouth go dry and worked hard to keep his face blank. He's not just a man, Elodin said, looking at Lyric appraisingly. Your father is my half-brother. We share our mother, Phaedon. She was a powerful wind-caller and a formidable captain. He grinned ferociously, memories shifting through his eyes like wind-nudged clouds. She once took down a fleet of 6 ships with a single wind racer. Not just a man. What is he? Runa demanded. What else is there? There are creatures deep in the Sea of Screams, godchildren of the great serpent Seishara, or Sereth as you likely know her. Your grandfather, your father's father, was one of those creatures. He could appear human, and Mother didn't know what he was when they met. He caught her eye and, well, Elodin spread his hands. Again was born. Again, Lyric said. Our father. Kel put his hand on Lyric's shoulder, feeling his heart flip as she reached up and covered his hand with hers. He was becoming accustomed to having her nearby, and it frightened him. Are we not fully human? Lyric asked. Her fingers tightened on Kel's hand. I don't know. Elodin stroked his chin thoughtfully. Your mother would know better than I. When we were children, Again didn't seem much different than me most of the time, except for... Elodin paused, a memory lifting the corners of his mouth. Except for what? Lyric asked. He can breathe underwater. Runa leaned forward, eyes intent on the captain's face. Are godchildren powerful? She asked. Elodin's brow furrowed. Yes. Kel looked at Runa, considering. If Elena was a powerful burner and their father was a godchild, how might that affect their magical ability? What would this revelation mean to King Rikarin? What might he do to them? Worried, his thoughts returned to Rendishar. He'd been so close to finding the truth about his silencing. He'd been on Rikarin's doorstep. What would he have learned if he'd gotten inside? Kel thought about his Thenden mother and father and felt the familiar ache deep inside his chest. Lyric shifted under his hand and Kel blinked, returning his focus to the room. He relaxed his fingers, realizing he'd tightened his grip on her shoulder. I don't know what it'd mean to the Gale, Elodin said. Being part Sareni should extend our laws and protection to you, but there's hatred in the hearts of many, passed down for generations. You want to stop the war, Runa asked. Why? I don't believe Seshara wants us to remain locked in this conflict, Elodin said. We are more than this war. The land we're fighting over is just land. It's not the life-giving water beneath us that carries our ships, greets our young, and buries our dead. The sea is our home, not Rendishar. We are proud, just like Rendisharans, and it's hard to let go of old grievances and choose a new path, to stop meeting blood with blood. Elodin spread his hands. But when does it end, if every knife is met with another? Have you tried to negotiate with King Rikarin? Lyric asked. Tell him you want peace. He doesn't want to listen. Your mother tried persuading him many times. Elodin's face darkened, and a muscle twitched in his cheek. How can you lay aside vengeance after what he did? Runa asked. Mother told us about the woman who came to Rendishar to discuss peace. Yes, Elodin said. His eyes glittered dangerously like shards of glass. Iladasha, the daughter of Beseda, one of the Gales and the head of my clan. Kel steadied the captain's face. How could he be willing to work with a man who'd murdered someone from his clan? What kind of man must Elodin be to be able to set that aside? Your clan? Runa asked. And yet you still seek an end to the war? It's what we've worked for. Elodin's eyes still blazed, but he seemed to have mastered his emotions. Hating the man does not help our people. If we keep fighting, maybe we'll win, but at what cost? How many Sareni will be left at the end? Beseda understands this, and despite her loss, she continues to speak for peace whenever the Gale gathers. She's a stronger woman than all of us, and I will see her vision carried out. Elodin steepled his fingers, eyeing them in turn. The survival of our people, our way of life, isn't the only thing we must consider, he said. There's a greater danger to all of us, not just to the Sareni or to Rendishar, but all of Aerith. Elodin looked at Kel, and Kel realized that with his shirt off, the man could see the tattoo ringing his throat. Did Elodin know what it meant? A greater danger? Lyric asked. The taint, Elodin said, looking at her. The poison that edges farther out into the Sea of Screams that wiped out Thenda. The nations of Aerith seem content to leave it be, to think it will remain where it is, but it's growing. He grimaced, irritation shifting through his eyes. Even the Sareni clans don't see its magnitude. They think the war is more pressing, and so they ignore it, a problem for another time. They don't see the Sea Reaper drifting towards them. The what? Runa asked. Elodin blinked, then laughed. I'm sorry, you're not familiar with the sea, are you? It's a fleshy, bell-shaped animal, transparent, quite beautiful actually, but its sting can kill. It's slow, so if you pay attention you can swim away from it, avoid the danger. He paused and stroked his chin, eyeing Lyric and Runa. Dendashara would likely wish that I return you to her so you can hide from those who seek you, but that's not a solution. I hope she'll forgive me for suggesting this, but I believe you can help us end the war. Return us to her? Lyric asked. You let us go? If you wish it, Elodin said, but I urge you first to consider my proposal. You are from both sides with Sareni and Rendishar in blood. You belong to both the sea and the land and can be the bridge between us. Like your mother, it's unlikely Rikarin will listen to you on your own, but if you have strong allies at your back, he'll be forced to reconsider. He's drawn to power and will seek an alliance, but if he or the other Sareni clans capture you, you'll be powerless, a tool to use how they wish. Elodin leaned forward, his eyes fierce and passionate, ablaze with hope. With allies to protect you, you'll be free to make your own choices, Elodin said. Free to demand change. You can broach peace with a mandate to work together to heal the taint before it destroys us. What allies? Runa asked. Your crew? No, Elodin said. We are too few. I propose speaking to the Ayanarans. The Ayanarans? Kel asked, surprised. The Ayanarans were a peaceful people who lived in a forest on the western coast of Aerith, as far from Rendishar as you could get. They believed they were descended from Aya, the mother tree, and that their sacred duty was to cherish all life. As a result, they'd always sought to remain apart from conflicts. Kell had always wanted to visit their forested country, but had never traveled farther west than Elysian. We share a border with Ionar, Lyric said slowly. They're peaceful, aren't they? They live in the forest? Yes, Eladin said. I hope you won't ask me to turn around. We're heading there now. I believe they're your best chance for maintaining autonomy. Kaya's chasing us, the woman who took you from Rathgar's hold. She'll hound us until she can take you to the Gale as ordered. I don't think I can protect you if we don't go to Ionar. But we can't, Lyric said, drying Eladin's eyes. Mama is dying. We have to go to her. She's what? Eladin pushed up from his chair, his eyes wide. We were in Rathgar's hold to find a healer, a dragon blessed, Runa said. When Kaya took us, we were trying to gain an audience with our grandfather. What happened? Where is she? Eladin asked. We traveled up the tainted shore, Runa said. Shock crossed Eladin's face, and he sat back into his chair. Up the shore? We ended up there when Mama came for us, Lyric said, after we left the Vale. The Vale! Eladin swore and scrubbed his hand through his hair. A tainted creature attacked us, Lyric said. It bit Mama, and the wise woman in Avern said the only way to save her is for a dragon blessed to remove the corrupted magic. We have to go back. I can't take you back to Rathgar's hold, Eladin said, frowning. We'd sail straight into Kaya's arms. Maybe I can send someone to get your mother and take her to a life singer. A what? Lyric asked. A Sireni mage healer, Eladin said. I can have her brought to us in Ionar. You can do that? Lyric asked. She looked at Runa, then at Kell behind her. Laerdy! Eladin bellowed, his voice echoing in the room. The door creaked open, and Laerdy stuck his head in, letting in a blast of rain-scented air. Laerdy, tell Elverna to send a goal to Herlin, Eladin said. Dendashara has the mage sickness and is at an inn in Avern. Tell him to get her on a ship and have them follow us. That is... He looked at Runa and Lyric. If you'll let me take you to Ionar? It'll be faster to send Herlin than to go ourselves. If she's there, he'll help her. Lyric and Runa exchanged glances. It sounds like the quickest way to help Mother without a dragon blessed, Runa said. Yes, Lyric agreed. She swiveled on the stool, looking up at Kell. He felt a thrill at the question in her eyes and nodded. She always sought to include him. Yes, please hurry, Lyric said, looking back at the captain. Laerdy, listening to the conversation, nodded. At once, Captain. He shut the door with a solid thunk, cutting off the howling wind. Can the bird fly in this storm? Lyric asked. What if it gets lost? She glanced at the window, worry creasing her face. This is but a light breeze to Elverna's goals, Eladin said, waving a hand. They'll enjoy the challenge. You'll let us know as soon as you hear something, Runa demanded. Of course, Eladin said. Thank you, Lyric said. We just got her back. Of course. Dendashara is family, Eladin said. Now, you should eat and rest. Recover your strength after your ordeal. I'll have Laerdy bring you food. You're welcome to rest here in my cabin. We're on the edge of the storm, so we should make good time to Ionar. You're familiar, then, with the creatures? Runa asked. Eladin, adjusting something on his desk, looked up. You said she has mage sickness, Runa said. You've heard of this before? Lyric, caught in the motion of stretching her back, reached out for Kell. He shifted closer, enfolding her hand in his. Yes, Eladin said gravely. Shortly after Salta's destruction, when survivors were deciding whether or not to rebuild, there were mages then who tried figuring out what happened. Whatever they did, called the creatures. What are they? Lyric asked. They looked human, but they had gills and claws. I don't know, Eladin said. I think they were Thendons. Perhaps they were inside the city when it happened. Kell felt a buzzing in his head as he listened to Eladin. If he just tried to remember and... No, he had to keep his mind clear. He couldn't think back to that day. Swallowing, he looked down at Lyric's hand and focused on her smooth skin. She sensed her looking at him as he moved his thumb back and forth across the back of her hand, trying to ground himself. Let's talk of something else, Lyric said, her eyes still on him. What? Runa barked. Why? Laerdy's arrival saved Lyric and Kell from responding. The wind brushed past the big man as he carried in a box and set it on the table. He uncovered 4 bowls filled to the brim with thin green noodles and shredded white meat in light brown broth. Reaching for a small woven basket, Laerdy lifted its lid, releasing a cloud of steam and revealing 4 pale dumplings. The goal's been sent, Laerdy said, then left the cabin. Herlin will send word once he has your mother, Eladin said. Now, please eat. Lyric's belly rumbled, and she laughed, leaning over Eladin's desk with a hungry look. Eladin chuckled, and even Runa's lips twisted into a grudging smile. Faces a little brighter, everyone grabbed a bowl and began to eat. The food was warm and delicious, and Kel found himself wishing for an extra dumpling. After eating, Captain Elodin repacked the dishes in the box Laerty left, then stepped over to the bunk, stripping off the blanket and tossing it over his shoulder. He removed clean blankets from the trunk near his bed and handed them to Lyric and Runa. "You can share my cabin," he said, nodding at them. "I'll sleep with my crew." "We don't want to force you out of your cabin," Lyric protested. "No need to show us special treatment," Runa said. "There are women on the ship. We can sleep as they do." Captain Elodin smiled. "I'm sure you can manage hammocks just fine, but you're my guests, and I insist. Kel here can join me with the crew." He smacked Kel good-naturedly on the shoulder, nearly knocking him over. "I'm sure my crew would love to test your knowledge of Cyrene sea shanties." Kel grinned. It'd been a while since he'd hunted for new songs. "I look forward to the challenge." He turned to Lyric. "You'll be fine?" he asked softly. "Of course we will," Runa snapped. Lyric rolled her eyes at her sister and stepped into Kel's arms, tucking her head beneath his chin. Kel couldn't resist looking at Elodin to see if Lyric's uncle disapproved of their intimacy, but the older man merely smiled. "I'll be close by if you need me," Kel murmured against Lyric's hair. Lyric tightened her fingers on his back, then stepped aside, smiling at him in a way that made him feel like they were alone. When she looked at Elodin, tucking a lock of hair behind her ear, Kel felt apprehension prickle his skin. "What are you doing, Kel?" he asked himself. Ignoring his inner voice, Kel turned to Elodin. "Ready to go," he said. As Kel followed Elodin from the cabin into the cold, rain-filled wind atop the deck, he glanced back and saw Runa say something to Lyric. He couldn't hear their words, but he saw Lyric shake her head and turn away from her sister with a blanket in her arms. The door shut, hiding the sisters. Kel chewed his lip. Had Lyric told Runa yet about his back? No, if she had, Runa would have confronted him. He frowned, stomach twisting. Why did it bother him that Lyric had kept his secret? He didn't want her sister to know, did he? Runa was unpredictable and quick to judgment. But if Lyric hadn't told her twin, was it because she was afraid Runa would reject him, try to pull her away, or was it because she feared him herself? "This way!" Elodin yelled over his shoulder. Holding onto his cloak, Kel followed the captain across the deck to the hatch below. As he climbed down to the crew's quarters, he tried to ignore his worries. And we will end there, and the next reading will be chapter 22. So we've got to know a little bit more about the Cyrene, and now they finally met their uncle. I really love Captain Elodin. I think he's a really fun character. And we've heard a bit about their father and their grandmother, Phaedon, who they unfortunately will never get to meet. This tattoo of mine is actually a wind collar from this series, so it was really fun to get a tattoo that was directly related to one of my stories. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed it, and I will be back with another reading. Hopefully you are having a good summer as much as you can with everything that's going on in the world. Anyway, as always, thanks for listening, and I will see you soon. Bye.